Hey everyone, Angelo here. Welcome to another design tutorial. Today, I want to show you how to create an interactive timeline in Adobe InDesign. In this lesson, I'm going to go over how to use the animation, timing, as well as show hide buttons and forms. So let's get started. All right, so let's get started on creating our interactive timeline infographic that will have animation and timing applied to it. I'm gonna make my way down to the second page that I created here, and we're gonna start by creating the arrows that you see in the infographic. To do that, I want to start with the rectangle frame tool and draw out just a simple rectangle like so, and go ahead and give it a color fill of your choice. I'm gonna make this Pantone red that I created here. With my rectangle frame tool selected still, go ahead and click and hold for the flyout, and then select the ellipse frame tool. Make your way to the center point of the shape and hold Shift and Option and drag out just a small circle like so, and give it a color fill of your choice. I'm just gonna make mine white. Now what I want to do now is use the Add Anchor Point tool to add 2 points to this rectangle. To access the Add Anchor Point tool, it will be under your pen tool flyout. So go ahead and click and hold, and then select Add Anchor Point. Go ahead and click on the shape, the rectangle first, and then with your Add Anchor Point tool, zoom in nice and close so you can see where you're adding these anchor points. I'm gonna add one right about there. You can see that the plus sign is showing next to my cursor. And then I'm gonna go to the left side and add another one. Perfect, so now I have 2 anchor points. I'm gonna zoom in to the right-hand side one. I'm gonna grab my selection tool, and I'm gonna click on just the anchor point that I created with my direct selection tool. And then when you see that it turns that blue color there, I'm gonna go ahead and use my right arrow key to make it into an arrow. And let's go with something like that, where we get the point. Okay, and then let's go ahead and do the same thing to the other side, but only you're gonna bring it inwards. So let's see how that's starting to look. That's good right there. And what I'm gonna do actually is maybe have some of it maybe hanging out of the gutter. How did I have it set up here? Yeah, I'll have the end point coming out through the gutter. Then I'm gonna go ahead and group these. So with your selection tool, just highlight both of them, collect them, and then Command G. And then so I have to create 5 more copies here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is hold my Alt key, Option on a Mac, Alt on a Windows, and then drag another copy. So something like that. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to Edit, Duplicate, Duplicate, Duplicate. How many more do I need? 1 more, 2, 3, 1 more. Let's do 1 more, duplicate. So you have even spacing all the way throughout, okay? So that's good, but the only thing here is I want these other ones, so I'm gonna click every other one with my selection tool, like so. And I'm gonna turn those ones into this lighter Pantone color, so you have every other version's a different color, which is the look I'm going for here, okay? So I'm gonna select all of them and bring them down a bit, maybe to the right. Something like that works. Let's move this illustration off to the left a bit. Okay, now what I want to do is create these buttons here, these information bubbles, I guess you could call them. So to do that, let's go ahead to the ellipse frame tool, drag out another circle. And so you want to match the color with the arrow that it's representing. Okay, and I'll have this one down below here, make it a little bit bigger so it goes right to the edge to edge of my column. And then I'm just gonna grab my line tool, and while holding Shift, I'm just dragging out a vertical line. I'm gonna go to my properties and I'm gonna go to stroke. I'm gonna select that color and the stroke size will be 6. Let's go 8. Okay, perfect. And then I'm just going to put that like so. Let's move this over a couple. Good. So I want the circle in the middle of my arrow to line up with that line that I created. And then what I will do is just group that, create another copy, hold your shift key and rotate it. And then you could put that one over here. You're gonna have to change the color of this. Oops. So we don't want a stroke on that, we just want to fill. And this one, we want the stroke. Perfect, okay? Okay, now I'm gonna add the years to correspond with each information arrow. The first one is 1817. I'm gonna go to my paragraph styles, and I did create a paragraph style that's called year text. And basically what I'm gonna do is just copy each one so I don't have to recreate it, and then just change out the year. So I make sure they're all aligned properly. That's good. So we're centering it and making sure, and use your smart guides, as you can see I'm doing, to make sure that they're lined up properly, centered. Okay, good. Now this one is going to be 1866. It's a lot easier to do it this way than to recreate everything. 1933, 1979. You can see we're going way back for this timeline. And by the way, I just went ahead and grabbed all this information. You can go ahead and create your own custom timeline to whatever you want. 1989, and the last one is 2009. So I'm just using 6 here, but as you know, timelines can be pretty extensive and as long as you'd like. Perfect. Now I'm going to add some information in these bubbles, which will act as the headline. Later on, we're going to click these bubbles and it's going to bring up some information. Next up is the pop-up text. I've added text frames above and below each year in my timeline. I'm going to format each text frame. I went ahead and created a paragraph style, which is called pop-out text. And the reason I called it pop-out text is because I'm going to create buttons on the actual bubble information with the headline that will have this information appear. That will be the last step, but it's just part of the design process here to get it set up before you start doing any of the animation or setting up any of the buttons. It's very important to get this all out of the way prior to doing all of that. Okay, there's a couple other things I'd like to do to these text frames. I'm going to click on, actually with your selection tool, hold the Option key down on your keyboard and double click to bring up the text frame options. Text frame options can also be found by going to Object, Text Frame Options, or Command or Control B. So there's many ways of getting to the text frame options. I find it the easiest just to double click while holding Option. Okay, so what I want to do is set the inset spacing to each of these. And so the first one the top, I want it to be 9 pixels. And then the remaining, I want it to be 6. Oh, so this is linked right now. So let's unlink it. You can see, because I want to make the settings a little bit differently. So if it's linked, just unlink it. Now that all the other ones are 6, I'm going to make this one 9. And you can see I have a nice amount of space throughout. I'm going to go ahead and do it to the remaining text frames here. So the inset spacing is all set up now. Now that I have that all taken care of, I'm going to click on the text frames and I'm going to make the fill of it this gray and change the tint of it to 50% for each one. So why don't we go ahead and collect all of them. by holding Shift and clicking on each text frame, going down to the Pantone color of choice, and changing the tint to 50%. Let's try 40% as it's still a little bit too dark, and let's change that last one also to 40. Perfect. As a final touch here, I do want to create a close button for these pop-out boxes, as we're going to use them as buttons to close the pop-out boxes later on. So I'm just going to grab my ellipse tool, and I just drew out a small circle like so, and I'm going to give it a fill of that gray color, and the stroke will be white. I'm going to make the point size of the stroke 2, and I'm just going to hang it over one of the frames here, and then we'll duplicate it and add it to the others. I also want to grab the type tool and just type in the letter X. Just want to make sure that I have no formatting to that, so that's good. And I do want it to be, I want this to be Gotham Black. So let's set that to Gotham Black. And I do want to change this X also to white, because I'm gonna place it in that circle that I just created. So this will be the close button. That's a little big, so let's just make it a little bit smaller. That's good, like so. So basically I'm gonna click the X, click the ellipse and group them, and then copy. And let's go ahead and add them to our other frames. Great, our timeline is now set up. Now comes the fun part where we can start adding animation, adding the timing so it plays just the way you want, as well as adding buttons in the show hide buttons and forms to make this interactive timeline complete. Let's start by adding animation to the arrows as well as the years, so they come in from opposite directions. Before we start, we need to open 3 panels in the Window Interactive dropdown. So let's do that. Go to Window, Interactive, and we want Animation, we want Buttons and Forms for later on, and we want Timing. I have all 3 accessed, and I'm just gonna pull them off to the side and tear it off this window panel, just so you can have them on the side and toggle between the 3 tabs while you're working. So let's start with the arrow from the far right, as well as the year on the far right, and work our way down to the left. So let's go ahead and click on the first one, and in the animation, we want to rename this arrow 1. I'm gonna make it arrow -1 because the version up top I did arrow 1. So arrow -1 just to take out any confusion. And we want this to fly in from the right. I'm sorry, no, we want this to fly in from the left, and we want the year to fly in from the right. So let's click on the year now, and let's call this year -1. This will come in from the right. Let's repeat the same process for the other arrows and years. Arrow -2. This will fly in from the left. And again, the event, we do want it to happen on page load. I'm just gonna revert back 1 second here. Let's go back to the first arrow. There's one thing I forgot to do, is change the duration to 0.5 to both the year and the arrow. We want this to come in fairly quickly, so setting it to 0.5 is a lot better than having it set to 1 second. It just ends a little bit quicker, which is what you want. So let's go ahead and make it 0.5 for the years. So this will be year -2, and this will fly in from the right with a duration of 0.5. Click on the next arrow. This will be arrow -3. This will fly in from the left on page load with a duration of 0.5, and we only want it to play once, unless you, of course, you wanted it to play more than that, but in this case, once is just fine. Year dash 3, fly in from right on page load with a duration of 0.5. Arrow dash 4, and this is going to come in from the left. The year will be year 4, year dash 4, with a preset of fly in from the right and a duration of 0.5 seconds. Let's click on the 5th arrow. I'm just gonna add a dash there. And this will fly in from the left on page load, 0.5 seconds. And I'll show you why I'm renaming these. Obviously, I always suggest renaming them, but it's really gonna come in handy when we start adding the timing to this animation. So this is year 5, and this will fly in from the right on page load, and it'll be 0.5. And let's just take care of the last one here. That's arrow 6. And this is flying in from the left on page load with a duration of 0.5 seconds. And finally, it's just the year 6. Preset is fly in from the right on page load with a duration of 0.5. Now, before I play this, I just want to do one more thing. I'm going to click on every arrow. And this is a little bit, it might take a little time to do this, but it's going to be worthwhile in the end. Click on the arrow, and then what you can do is actually, while you have the arrow clicked, you can select the do you see this green arrow here? That's basically a path which allows you to maneuver it whichever way you want, and you can actually move these handles, these anchor points around if you want it to curve as well. But what I want this to do is to fly in from a very longer distance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag it. Do you see I'm just dragging the end point all the way to the end of the page? I'm actually going to do that with all of them. So click the arrow, then click the green arrow. Basically all that green arrow is telling you is which way it's going to fly in from, but it's also showing you the distance. So if it's a short line like that, that is the distance it will come from. So I actually want these to fly in from a further distance. And you'll see why. It just has a little bit better look to it, and the effect of it just looks a little bit more stunning when it opens up on page load. And like I said, it takes a little bit of effort, but when you open up the page, you'll see that it's well worth it in the end. So I'm gonna keep dragging these out here. So basically just click the green arrow and then drag out the end point. And then this last one here. And then you'll just have to repeat the same process with the years. So click the green arrow, which is telling you which way it's coming from. And the only thing you're moving is grabbing the anchor point handle and dragging the anchor point handle to the edge of the page. Okay, so because these ones are coming in from the right hand side, that's all I'm doing. I'm just clicking and dragging these all the way to the edge of the page, and then they'll come in from a farther distance, which is great. Now that I've completed that, let's go ahead and check out our work. I'm going to preview it in the EPUB preview window, and you can see how these are appearing. And that's okay. Right now they're coming in separately. This is where timing comes into play, and they'll come in together. Okay, so why don't I go ahead and show you how that works so they both fly in together at the same time. In the timing panel here, you can see that all the elements that I just created with the arrows and the years are listed here. So what I want to do is click on arrow 1, hold my command or control key and click on year 1, and then I want to play these together. So you can see down below in the right hand side of the timing window, go ahead and you can see once you click that, these are linked to get together. So I'm going to click on arrow 2, year 2, arrow 3, don't forget to hold your command key, and then you can play those, just the corresponding numbers together. Obviously, if you play these all together, they're all going to come in at the same time, whereas I don't want that. I want them to come in as groups, individually as groups. So let's check it out now. So you see when they fly in together, that one looked cool. I think not this one here, 1933, I may have forgot to change that to 1 second. So let's revisit that. Go to animation. How about the arrow? Yeah, see the arrow, there was a little delay there. So let's change the arrow to 0.5 seconds. So that should work now. And we're gonna move on now to creating animations on these bubbles. Now that our arrows and years are all set up and they're all animated the way I want, let's go ahead and focus on these bubbles with the headlines, which I've grouped, and these will be next up in our animation. So once all the arrows and years fly in, these bubbles will appear one at a time from right to left. Okay, so let's go ahead and start in that direction. Now, because I've grouped these, I'm going to click anywhere and click on this first one, and it's called Info 1. So let's call it Bubble 1. Okay, and I want this to fade in. Let's see what did I set this one up top to? So this one's gonna zoom in. It's gonna zoom in 2D. Let's go ahead and do that. Click on that, Bubble 1, and zoom in 2D. That's a good one. So let's click that. And I want that also to be 0.5 seconds. On page load. So let's go ahead and make this one Bubble 2. And this one will also be zoom in 2D on page load with a duration of 0.5 seconds. This is Bubble 3. The preset is all the same, so zoom in 2D with a duration of 0.5. Bubble 4 with a preset of 2D, zoom in on page load, 0.5 seconds. Bubble 5. Zoom in 2D. Duration is 0.5 seconds on page load, and we just got to take care of this last one. Bubble 6 with a preset, zoom in 2D on page load, 0.5 seconds. Now before I go any further, I want to check out the timing panel, because oftentimes, so that's good the way it's set up. You can see, always check your timing. This is how it's going to appear. So arrow 1, year 1, and it'll keep going that way. And then it'll appear with 1 bubble, 2 bubble, 3 bubble, and so on. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and add buttons to have the information pop up, and also add buttons with rollover effect to close those pop-up buttons. So let's do that now. With your selection tool, go ahead and click the first pop-out frame, and let's turn it into a button. So in the Buttons and Forms panel, in the Type, click it, select Button, and let's change this to Pop Out 1. The event is fine, but I do want to hide this until it's triggered. So down in the bottom left here, check that off, hidden until triggered. Go ahead and create buttons in the other pop out frames. So this would be Pop Out 2. And I want to hide that until triggered. Click on the third one, button, Pop Out 3, hidden until triggered. Click on the fourth one, button, Pop Out 4, hidden until triggered. Repeat the same process for the last two. This will be Pop Out 5, hidden until triggered. And the last one, button, will be pop out 6. And that'll be hidden until triggered. We also have to repeat that process with the close buttons. So click the first one here, change that into a button. This will be close -1, hidden until triggered. Click on the second one. This will be close -2, hidden until triggered. Click on the third close button, turn it into a button, rename it close -3. And again, I'm putting the dash because I created previous ones called close 1. So it's just easier and takes out any of the confusion. Close -4, hidden until triggered. Did I hide this one? I did not, so hide that. Perfect. And it's easy to kind of miss things when you're doing this many settings on an animation and buttons, so it's always good to take your time and then always go back and check that you haven't missed anything. So this is close -5. Yep, that's 5, and it's hidden until triggered. We got one more here. Turn that into a button, close -6, hidden until triggered. Now let's create buttons out of the bubbles as well. So click on the first one, create that into a button. Let's call this bubble info 1. Let's call it bubble information 1. Yep, the event will be release or tap. The action will be show hide buttons and forms. And this is where you're going to hide or show different buttons on the layout. So make sure that when you're doing this, not to leave things on to ignore, but to actually hide it or show it. Unless of course you want it to be ignored. So in this case, I want it to show pop out 1 and hide all the other pop outs. Right? Because when I click it, I just want the first one to appear. But if I left these unignored, nothing would happen. They would still show. And in this case, I want to show close 1, but hide all the other close buttons. The bubble information 1, which is this, I do want to ignore because I don't want to hide it. And I don't want to have it show or appear afterwards, okay? So let's do the same thing to the second bubble information button. So let's go ahead and click that, British Engineer. The type will be a button, bubble information 2. The action is going to be show hide buttons and forms, hide pop out 1, show pop out 2, and then hide everything else. For the pop outs, we want to hide close 1, show close 2, and then we want to hide everything else. And just leave bubble 1 and 2 on ignore. So let's see how that looks so far. With the buttons, you'll see that the animation will come in first, and then we can test out our buttons, our first 2 that we set up. So there are the bubble information. We set up this button, and we haven't set up the close structure yet, but you could see that both of those will work. Okay, so when I click each one, the other one will actually hide, but we'll go another step further and add a close button to this as well. Okay, so let's keep going and set up the rest of our buttons for our bubble informations. I just added the last bubble information button to the layout. I applied the show hide buttons and forms. So let's take a peek and see how it looks now with the animation, as well as the button structure that we just applied. You can see the animations coming in nicely. The 2D zoom in. Now I can click these bubbles and you can see I can make my way through. As a final step, let's just add a close button because we've already set up the close button icon. So let's set up an action to actually close those frames. On the first close button, go ahead and click it with your selection tool. And in the actions, we're also going to set a show hide buttons and forms action. And basically all we want to do is hide everything. So don't have anything show in terms of the pop-outs or the close buttons. So go ahead and hide them all. And then what I want to do is add a rollover effect on here. And so I have a normal and rollover, but click on the rollover appearance and then double click to drive into that selection and turn the color to another, maybe the red color here. I have it set to the stroke. So let's go ahead and make it that color like so. And you can see now I have two appearance states. Before, and when you roll over, it's gonna turn into that red, and then when you click it, it will close, okay? Let's repeat the same process to this close button. I'm gonna click on it, and I'm gonna call it close-2, which I've already renamed previously. In the actions, let's give it a show hide buttons and forms action, and let's turn off everything in terms of visibility. So hide everything. You do not want anything to appear when you close this close button. So turn off all the close and the pop-out frames, but ignore all the bubble information because you don't want those to disappear at any point. In the rollover appearance, go ahead and click rollover. With rollover appearance still selected, double click to drive into that selection. Go to your swatches panel, make sure you're on the fill and turn it from gray to the Pantone red or whatever color you like. And then when you go back, you can see the normal appearance state and the rollover appearance state. I'm going to repeat the rest of these close buttons. Then I'm going to show you how this looks in a web browser. So here it is, the evolution and history of the bicycle, my interactive and animated timeline. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. The timeline interactivity takes place on page load. You can see the arrows came in along with the years. I did add this cyclist illustration come in at the end as a fade in. I'm going to click on the information bubbles and you can see that the information pop-outs come in as I'm clicking them. But as an added bonus, I can hover over these information frames, and in the corner where we set up the close button, you can see I can hover over them, and when it turns red, I can go ahead and close it. So that's how you create an interactive and animated timeline in Adobe InDesign. If you enjoyed this tutorial, if you found it helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to learn more about interactive design, go ahead and click the playlist above.